All right, I call this meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll? I'm here.
Councilmember Austin Lane. Present. Councilmember Barry. Councilmember Clay.
Present.
Councilmember Elrich.
Here.
Councilmember Stevens.
Present.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
All right. Are there any council comments or announcements?
Yes, I wanted to just say publicly how concerned I am about the park and planning proposal that it be moved to Rockville. There was a recent...
That's actually on the agenda today.
Oh, we're doing a resolution? Yes. Very good. Okay. I just wanted to call this Gazette article to people's attention and thank Marcy Stickle for her public statement.
Any other comments?
I have an announcement.
Okay, go ahead.
The Safe Tacoma proposal will be presented to the Tacoma DC Neighborhoods Association on Tuesday night. The residents who are working very hard to see this implemented and funded are making sure that there is cross-jurisdictional support and involvement. So things seem to be taking shape with that program, and I'm encouraged by what the police chief came to us with probably a year and a half ago now. But it does look like we might have some momentum for it this year. And I'll keep the council posted.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of minutes. We have in front of us the minutes from February 27th, March 6th, and March 13th.
Move approval.
Second.
Is moved in second. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is the public comment period. This is the time that's set aside for comments on items that are not on our regular agenda or the public hearing. We will, of course, provide opportunity for comments on our regular agenda items and on, obviously, the public hearing. But if there's any comments on items that are not on our agenda this evening, this would be the appropriate time. And I would ask both for this public comment period and for the public hearings, if people who come to the podium will identify yourself, first of all, and secondly, if you'll keep your comments to 3 minutes. And there will be a timing light on the podium that will let you know when your 3 minutes are up, and I'll let you know, Pat, also.
Okay. Yep, my name's Pat Lovelace, 7620 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park. And one thing I'd like to say is I don't know if people know it, but we have a wonderful person running for state senate. His name is Jamie Raskin. He's doing a lot of work against the death penalty. He's doing a lot of work for low income. He's doing a lot of work for the underprivileged. And I want to know if City Council has thought about supporting him. And I'd like to know if Mayor Porter, if you heard of Jamie Raskin and the work he's doing. And I wonder if how you feel about it.
I've heard about that, but I am supporting the current state senator.
Oh, you like the current state? I like Jamie Raskin.
I understand that. I get that message. Thank you.
He's a great person, and but also I'd like to know, more of the information. If people are aware of, the more work we need to be doing for our youth in our city, the work we need to be doing against drugs in our neighborhood, against the rising crime rate and the rising fear rate that the low income and the elderly happen to have. I'd like to know, like to see, a little more, a little more work being done on that, a little more work being done on social justice issues, and to bring Tacoma Park, into leadership of our nation. That would be great, to have, one more star on our flag, and I'd like to call that star Tacoma Park. To lead us in the 21st century against violence, against poisoning our minds on drugs, and against gangs, and against any forms of violence that can rot our city up from the inside out. And I think Jamie Raskin seems to be doing a lot of that without having to resort to the death penalty and without having to resort to any forms of violence. I'd like to see our city, carry on in that tradition, a tradition of peace, tradition against violence. I'd like to see a little more of that, and have a little more, programs for mental health, more programs for our cities. We're going to build a gym. Yeah, but we need gym programs to put into that gym. Anyone can put up a box and call it a gym. But we need programs to put in that gym, something the kids can come home to go to after school. We need that. Otherwise the crack man is out there waiting for them. He'll take their money, he'll take their time, but we got to be able to have something that the kids will come to before even thinking of turning to the crack man. The crack man is our worst terrorist. He has the weapons of mass destruction. Those are called drugs. Those are called weapons. Those are called hate. We got to turn away from that. Let's put a gym program in for once. Let's put after-school programs in. Let's put other youth programs in. It calls Tacoma Park.
Thank you, Pat.
Tacoma Park.
Thank you,
All right.
Pat.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments at public comment period? Any other public comments? All right. The next item is the city manager's updates.
Yes, just a couple items on the community center project. Wanted to let the council know that the Phase 2 construction is moving along quite well. As I had mentioned last week, the site work around the library had gotten underway. Since the last council meeting, the work on the roofs has also gotten started, and the electrical contractor has started work on the various security components associated with Phase 2. At this point, we are definitely on target for completion of Phase 2 in May. So everything on Phase 2 is moving along quite well. There are still a number of unresolved issues regarding Phase 1. As the council is aware, there are certain items that will be the subject of mediation. There's been some paperwork going back and forth between the attorneys, but at this point there has been no date set for that mediation process. As soon as a date has been established, I'll advise the council accordingly. Also wanted just to follow up on a question that I think had been posed by Councilmember Siemens last week, and it was a question about some of the weekend activities in the community center. Had the opportunity actually to be in on Saturday and talk to some of the staff about some of the programs that were going on while I was here, and just thought I would share those with the council. On this past Saturday, there were 3 different programs that were sort of ongoing from the morning to the early afternoon hours, depending on the program. Those were the Washington Storytellers Theater, a Kung Fu class, and Arts Alive. And talking to the staff, a number of other visitors came in basically, particularly with the art exhibitions that have been sponsored by Arts and Humanities. They've seen a lot of increase in unscheduled traffic on the weekend hours for people who don't have an opportunity during the week perhaps to come see those exhibits. Some follow-up questions from baseball registration, people asking questions about recreation programs since the guide had gone out, just coming in and basically recycling batteries and things of that nature. And talking to the recreation director, what she indicated is it really varies a little bit from weekend to weekend in terms of level of activity. Saturdays are probably a fuller schedule than Sundays, though depending on which Sunday you're talking about, there may be room rentals that are occurring. I mean, obviously one of the things that happened when this facility opened is we had to set some hours of operation, not knowing exactly what the traffic would be, and certainly I think with the commencement of Phase 2, probably on or around June 1st, I think you'll probably see the weekend traffic, particularly with some of the youth rooms, the game room and things like that picking up. In the interim, quite frankly, it's kind of hard to predict, and both the recreation director and I do have some hesitancy about just closing without notice to the public. So it's certainly something that the council would like to talk about. Again, certainly now is probably not the time given all the people who are in attendance for the public hearing, but that certainly can be an item we can take up at another time if the council would like. But I did want to basically answer some of Councilmember Siemens' questions because I think they were valid ones.
Jerry?
Thank you for those answers. And really the area where I've had the I wouldn't say concern, but where the question arose was in the times that I've been here on, especially Saturdays, some Sundays, where we were staffing the building when no more events were scheduled.
Right.
And that's the period of time that seemed like we were underutilizing our staff hours to have 2 people here, or 1 person here for that matter, when we're just expecting possibly some walk-in traffic. And some of the times that I've been here, it's been many hours before the closing time when the staff member was going to leave. And so I think what would be helpful to me is if we could look at history over the last couple of months of Saturdays and Sundays of what was the finish time of the latest event.
Yeah, certainly I'd be happy to provide that to the council. One of the things I may just mention from a staffing standpoint in terms of changing hours, we can certainly do that for our full-time employees or other employees who belong to the union. There are some notice requirements that we need to give in terms of a change in schedule, so having a variable schedule can create some difficulties. And with the part-time staff, obviously, they've accepted a position kind of having an expectation that they would work a certain number of hours. So if we start changing that too readily, that may create some difficulties in staff retention. But certainly I'd be happy to put together the history that Councilmember Siemens requested, and the council can kind of talk about it from there. The one issue that the Recreation Director did mention that she would like to talk about with the council at some point in the near future is what we do on holiday weekends. Typically when it's a major holiday, 3-day weekend or whatever, we don't tend to have a lot of instructors who are working, say, over Memorial Day weekend. And I think she would like to have some discussion with the council at some point in terms of what we do with the facility when there's probably not a lot of scheduled activities in the building. And that's one occasion that she could think of that may warrant some reduced hours or closure.
But we do have a scheduled, or we are going to schedule a discussion at some point about the whole issue of scheduling and how the use of the building is going once we've had some experience with it.
And I think the staffing things, our time with the employees, there might be some flexibility on the employees' part too, and maybe a way to work around or work with the union on that, because I think many people are more interested in working regular hours during the daytime than weekend hours, so, especially weekend Saturday evening hours.
Yeah, what we do for our full-time employees, I think Ms. Hadeven may have mentioned this in a prior discussion, but I think it's alternating like every 6 or 7 weeks. One of the full-time staff members actually changes what would be a typical Monday through Friday week, and that weekend day actually becomes incorporated as part of their schedule.
Thank you.
Mark, did you have a question?
Different question. I know that Columbia Union College just got cited by, I guess, the state Environmental Protection Agency for illegal dumping
Correct.
into the creek. And I know that we've known about it for some time, and I know that the city relied on the state to ultimately enforce. But this means it's essentially been going on for a very, very long time, considering the drain is in the middle of one of their rooms. But we've known about it for a couple of years, and I guess it's one thing to say that the state's, it was given to the state, and we expected the state to enforce it. I guess I'd like to know what the department can do to be more proactive or more aggressive about this. I mean, did we notify the state once? Did we notify the state repeatedly? Did we monitor for subsequent discharges? Or did we just come out when somebody happened to notice it, and then we came out and said, oh, bring in the state? Because this is a lot of stuff that's gone down the drain and into the creek. And I know that there was a proposal for that our engineer had a meeting with CUC and proposed a plan for fixing it, but they don't have any money in their budget. But I don't think this is like an optional thing where they can say, we'll do this when we get money for the budget. So I guess I would like to see a more proactive solution to this immediate problem. And I'd like some thought from the staff about how to deal with the state so that we simply just don't report something and then wait for the state to get around to it. Because as I understand it, somebody said they have 4 inspectors or something like a handful of inspectors for the entire state.
Yeah, I think the issue, Councilmember Elrich, that you're raising in terms of the state's ability to respond is an accurate one. Ms. Braithwaite had broached this subject with me several months ago, and we talked about basically working with the county as the primary enforcing agency, and she's had some discussions with them. there is actually language that is in the process of being drafted by the city attorney's office to bring forward at a future work session to the council. In regard to the specific questions you had about Columbia Union College, I'll touch base with Ms. Braithwaite and get that information out to you later this week, if that would be okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Just one last issue I just wanted to mention. I think as the council was aware, there was a site visit in October by the Commission on Law Enforcement Accreditation, and as the council may recall, there was a recommendation by the site committee that the city receive accreditation status. That actually has to be formalized by the commission itself. That did take place this past weekend at the CALEA conference, and it's late Saturday evening, the staff was notified that the city has received accreditation from CALEA. So I'd like to just publicly take this opportunity to thank Chief Kramer and her staff for all their work that went into this. It was a very time-consuming effort, and it was certainly a team effort on the part of everyone in the police department. There will obviously be a number of steps that have to take place on an annual basis to ensure that the department retains that accreditation status, but I think it's certainly an accomplishment by the police department that's worth noting.
Definitely worth noting, and we're very proud of them.
Thank you for the effort.
Is that your report?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, I think we covered them all. We now have on our agenda 2 public hearings. The first one is on a proposed charter amendment, and the second one is about the current rent stabilization ordinance. I'm going to call them in the order in which they are listed on our agenda, and the first one would be the public hearing on the charter amendment. There has been a charter amendment on instant runoff voting proposed. I'm sorry if I can't read the handwriting very well. The public hearing on the charter amendment, I have 2 people signed up. Shalinda Berry. You wanted to sign up on the other one? Okay. And also Dee Colser. I'm sorry if I'm not reading this correctly.
The gentleman right there.
Okay.
For the other.
Might be for the other one also. We do have one set of written comments from Ed Sharp, which has been provided to the council on this issue. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no comments, we will call this hearing to a close.
Oh, wait,
And-
there's Rob Ritchie.
Rob? Did you want to speak to the issue of the charter amendment? Okay, well, good. Well, then we will not close it. We were just calling that a public hearing. Did you want to say something? Yes, go right up to the podium. We're running a little bit ahead of schedule, and I do apologize to people who are planning to be here in about 10 minutes.
Okay, sorry. I'm glad you're dealing with the charter amendment, which the voters, of course, approved last November. And I'm Rob Ritchie with Fair Vote, and we are very interested in this issue of instant runoff voting and work on it around the country. I guess the only thing I might add to whatever you may have said is something you may not have tracked, which is that there has been an instant runoff voting election since we talked about it with several of you last fall. Burlington, Vermont, the biggest city in Vermont, which isn't one of the biggest cities in the country, but it is the biggest city in Vermont, they had their first mayoral elections with instant runoff voting in the first Tuesday in March. And I have a summary of how it went, but a couple of quick things is out of every 1,000 voters that voted in that election, only 1 made an error in the very first election with it on paper ballots. So voters had to handle a new system, and the voter error rate for those who voted in the mayoral race was only 0.1%, 99.9% voted accurately. And they had a vigorous contested race, 5 candidates running for an open seat for mayor. The first choice winner was with 39%, so they needed to go to a second round of counting. And there was a very sort of sensible flow to that race in which that candidate ended up winning, but they had to prove that they had 50% support. There was an exit poll conducted by a local university professor, and just some quick findings from that are that people were asked if they liked the new system better than the old system, and 63% said they preferred it, 18% said keep the old system. So by a margin of basically by more than 3 to 1, people supported the new system. 71% agreed that instant runoff voting was a better way of expressing voting preferences. 21% disagreed. 91% disagreed that the ballot was confusing. This, again, was the very first election with the system. And there's other findings. But anyway, this was good confirmation for us that this system works, it makes sense to people, and we think it's the right one for Tacoma Park.
Well, thank you very much. Is there... Well, the public hearings are advertised not as a specific time, but as we will take them up approximately the time that they're scheduled on the agenda. If there's someone who wishes to comment on a topic that we're having a public hearing on, they can submit comments. I believe we're holding the record open until the end of the week. Is that correct, Jesse? The record is being held open for written comments until the end of the week. So if people have additional comments that they would like to make after we call the public hearing to a close, they can submit those comments until the end of the week.
They could also stay and speak during the regular meeting.
Yes, there will also, thank you for reminding me, there is also the first reading of the charter amendment tonight, and people can speak at that time if they wish to. All right, seeing no other comments on this public hearing, I'll call this public hearing to a close. All right, so we will begin now with the second public hearing, which is the public hearing on the rent stabilization ordinance. And what I'm going to do, I have a number of people who have signed up to speak, and I will begin with the people who've signed up. But after we've gone through the people who've signed up, then anyone else who wishes to speak can speak at that time. You won't be precluded from speaking, but I am going to start with the people who have signed up. And the sign-up sheets, I think, are there still sign-up sheets over there? There's still sign-up sheets over on the side table there. Okay, I'm going to read the first person who signed up and then let the second person know that they're next up. The first person who signed up is Jim DeShane, to be followed by Reuben Snipper. Mr. DeShane? And I will apologize ahead of time if I get people's names wrong. Sometimes it's hard to read the handwriting.
My name is Jim DeShane, you have it right. Mayor, members of the council, I'm here on behalf of myself and my wife. In the last year and a half, my son, who also is an apartment manager and owner, we've divested 4 of our buildings in Tacoma Park, 616 Sligo Creek Parkway, 8306 Roanoke, 7209 Flower, and 8306 Flower. All 4 of those buildings, I believe, are going condo. We have 1 building left in Tacoma Park at 704 Cheney, and we're going to either sell that or go to condo conversion. For us, it just doesn't make sense to stay in Tacoma Park. We will do our investment in Maryland, elsewhere, or in Virginia. You know, with the cost of taxes rising, insurance, utilities, as you know, it's just not for us any longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Reuben Snipper, to be followed by Teresa De La Santa.
Hi, I'm Reuben Snipper, 705 Erie Avenue. I've lived in Tacoma Park over 20 years. I own a single-family home here. Before that, I lived in Ithaca, New York, and I actually owned a small apartment house, lived in 1 unit, and rented the others. So I have been both, and then, of course, I've been a tenant at various times. And I think the thing I want to say is that I'm sure tonight you'll hear from the landlords about the economics of whether they can or can't make money on rental units. I will say that Ithaca, New York had a very stringent rent control system when I was there, and it was difficult to make money under that circumstance. On the other hand, the whole point of if you step back a moment, the whole point of public policy is you end up favoring one group over another, and it is a difficult balancing act. In the case of rent control, what you're saying is that the benefits to the tenants of having tenants in our community, renters, outweighs the interests of landlords who could make more money if there were no rent control. I think that's a fairly obvious thing to say. But as a single-family person in Tacoma Park, one of the things I appreciate about Tacoma Park is that profit isn't the first thing that's thought of by the City Council and public policy in Tacoma Park. We consider the needs of the people in the community, and it is really nice to have a variety of people in Tacoma Park. It's something that enriches us all here. And it's, to me, an important sort of defining characteristic of Tacoma Park. And if we were to start letting that go, if we said, okay, we're going to get rid of rent control, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do that, it would change the character of Tacoma Park in ways that I think, quite frankly, a lot of people in Tacoma Park would be upset. I mean, that's why we live in Tacoma Park. So I urge you to consider, as I'm sure you will, carefully the difficult public policy balancing act of tenants and versus landlords. But remember, it is part of the character of Tacoma Park to keep affordable housing here. And the city has done a lot and should be commended for supporting that. And it's extreme, as everyone, I'm sure the other tenants will tell you that are here, it is extremely difficult to find affordable places to rent in Montgomery County, and it's only getting worse. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you. Teresa De La Santa, to be followed by, it looks like Mr. and Mrs. Joseph. Ms. De La Santa.
Good evening. My name is Teresa De La Santa. We own 2 5-unit apartment buildings at 8204 and 8206 Houston Court. As you know, one of the biggest burdens of landlords is maintaining their property, but there are also real costs of operating the property. Between February of last year and February of this year, our gas costs have increased 37%. Our electric costs have increased 36%. It's totally insupportable that we could continue, and we spend 15% of our income on utilities, on heat and electric, because our units include utilities. And there's simply, physically, it's monetarily impossible to maintain that on a 2.8% rent increase. It just cannot be done. Even if all of the other costs remain the same, we could not break even. And I think you're starting to see this. I saw in the Tacoma Park newsletter that 30% of the apartment units have been converted over or taken off of the rolls in the last 5 years. Can you imagine what it's going to be like in the next year? I think a lot of landlords are saying, we can't do this anymore. Let's turn them into condos. Let's turn them back to houses, whatever. And it not only destroys the landlords, but it destroys the opportunity of tenants to lease apartments at a reasonable price, because they're simply not going to be available anymore, because landlords cannot sustain apartments on 2.8% increases when utilities are going up 30%, projected to go up 70%. I think you have to realize the realities of the cost of what you're imposing on landlords. Thank you.
Thank you. I would suggest that we will be able to get through the people who want to speak more expeditiously if we don't have people applauding or otherwise everyone who speaks. I think it looks like Mr. and Mrs. Joseph to be followed by Mark Hessel. Do I have anyone here by the name of Joseph? Okay, we'll go on to Mark Hessel to be followed by Patricia Powell.
Good evening. I'm Mark Hessel. I represent a number of landlords in Tacoma Park. And in 2004, before the council tabled the issue, I represented or spoke on behalf of about 20 or 30 landlords. I don't want to spend my time tonight discussing the minutiae of rent control. I believe there's a big issue. It's the elephant in the room. And last Monday night, Councilmember Elrich eloquently stated what that issue is. He said that he thought rent stabilization was a moral issue. And I didn't expect to say this, but I agree with him. If by that he meant that being a moral issue is whether or not Tacoma Park should provide at least a minimum number of affordable and expensive housing units within its borders, or provide inexpensive housing for people who can't afford to pay more. Government should be addressing these issues more often than it has in the past. Tacoma Park, frankly, being a notable exception, it tackles a lot of moral issues. I applaud Councilmember Elrich and the city for that. But I think the council has to be brave and face the issue squarely. It's called affordable housing. Okay? It's not really about rent control or rent stabilization. It's about affordable housing, defining what you mean by it, what your goals are, what you're going to do to stem the whooshing of rental units from rental to condos. Rent stabilization started about a quarter century ago when prime rate was up over 20%. It's not the issue anymore. It has become rent control. Rents are running, from most stories I hear, $300 to $500 a month below market. Okay. If you look at the math very simply, if there are 3,300 rental units in the city and they're averaging just $300 a month below market, that's $1 million a month, $12 million a year being transferred from landlords to tenants, regardless of whether or not the individual tenants need that help. What the city ought to be doing, and what the council, I think, in all intellectual honesty ought to be saying is, we're going to stop this nonsense of talking about rent stabilization right now. What you should be doing, I think, is going to staff and saying, it's very nice that you compiled all that information about all the other cities in the country, but we need for you to identify our actual need for housing assistance in Tacoma Park, figure out what it's going to cost, find sources for the money, implement a program, and phase out rent stabilization. You need to focus on affordable housing, not on rent stabilization. It's much too broad a brush to achieve the goals that I think we all have. And a proper affordable housing program will maintain more rental units in the city. It will also allow landlords to maintain their properties better. No landlord wants to say, my building isn't in good shape, but things start to look shabby over time. I'm worried that the council maybe doesn't intend to try to address this affordable housing issue. I'll wrap up in a few seconds.
Thank you. Can you wrap it up in one sentence?
Yeah, rationally address affordable housing. That's what this is really all about. The details of rent control shouldn't even be on the table.
Thank you. Patricia Powell, followed by, I believe it's Crystal Pittman. And I apologize if I've got that name wrong.
Good evening, Mayor Porter and council members. My name is Patricia Powell, and I am the president of the Houston Arms Tenants Association. I attended the work sessions, and I'm not really certain as to how to comment on this issue because we really are talking about affordable housing and rent stabilization. I'm a little perplexed by the recent landlord's request for hardship status when only 4 landlords have filed a hardship application since 1992. Why wasn't the city inundated with hardship applications after the Katrina hurricane, when shortly after the price of gasoline and oil increased dramatically due to price gouging? The predictions were announced for these increases, and even I knew that all utilities would follow suit. Why did the landlords not foresee these increases and act accordingly at that time? I tried to come up with an appropriate analogy for what would best suit the situation. The only thing that I could come up with would be purchasing a building and assuming that my expenses would either remain the same or be lowered at some point of my ownership. There isn't any logic in this analogy, just like there isn't any logic with the landlord's request. How can a landlord purchase property in Tacoma Park knowing that they have purchased property in a rent-controlled municipality and not plan accordingly? Why aren't the realtors and the lenders educating these landlords at some point during the process? It is clear that the landlords are not doing their homework. Can the tenants go to their employers and ask for a hardship pay increase because their rents are being increased? I doubt it. Most employers do not even want to give a cost of living increase. If the city is willing to offer the landlords a hardship increase, is the city planning to extend the same hardship offer to the tenants? It's only fair. And if this were so and were to happen, can you imagine how quickly the city's budget would be depleted? In closing, I have asked myself whether or not this is a strategy to drive up the cost of rent so high that tenants are forced to vacate their homes, thus relieving the landlords who may intend to convert their buildings to a condo without having to properly file, give notice, and pay the tenants what they are due according to the condo statutes of Tacoma Park, Montgomery County, and the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you. Crystal, and I apologize if I haven't got this right, Crystal Pittman, followed by Del Dozier.
Good evening. Yes, you got my name right. It's Crystal Pittman, and I'm a Tacoma Park resident, and I have been living here for about 15 years now. I have a junior in high school, getting ready to go into his senior year, and hopefully on to college. But when I come here tonight is to ask the council, the landlords, to come together and find a way to, as this gentleman was saying, and I agree, that the issue is affordable housing. And because I am stressing and fretting over maintaining my home that I've been in for 15 years, I rent. I can't afford to buy. A lot of people say, you should buy, you should buy. But if you can't afford to buy it, the reality is you can't buy. And you have to have empathy for people who cannot buy. Not everybody is making, I don't know what you have to make to afford to buy, but I know my salary, according to Ms. Orman, or what's her name, Susie Orman, is not the salary level that I should be at to even dare try to think about buying a home. So I have to rent. And as a single parent ready to put my son into college, it's a great concern. And even if he'll be able to finish at the high school that he's been going to for the past 3 years, because our building is going condo. So, you know, where are we going to go? Are we going to be in an area where he can finish the school he's been in? He has 1 year left. Or are we going to be pushed into PG County or Virginia or who knows where we're going to be able to afford housing? I understand this is like a two-edged sword because you have landlords who need a rent increase to accommodate their capital improvement, and you have tenants who cannot afford the higher rent increase. So like the gentleman was saying, if the government can come together and form some solution before you phase out affordable housing, because the condo conversion and the other suggestion I heard the other night about when someone moves out on their own, then the rent can be raised to the market rates. It's just another way for me as a low-income person. It just feels like we're always the one to feel the brunt of change, even if you think it's good change. Because for the 15 years I've been here, before Discovery came and all the new stores came into the area, you know, we were living here no problem. Now that the changes come, it's like we can't get to enjoy the changes and the benefits that come into our community. We always have to go. And I'm not looking at it as a prejudice issue in terms of race, but it's prejudice in terms of income, because it's the low income, I don't care what color you are, that feels it. And you just have to be low income to understand it. So we're asking for some empathy and sustainability for affordable housing. And thank you.
Thank you. Del Dozier, followed by Ellen Ensel. Del Dozier. Okay, Ellen Ensel, followed by Shalinda Burney.
Hi, good evening. I'm Ellen Ensel. My husband and I own a three-family home. We live on the top floor and we rent out 2 units, so we are subject to rent stabilization. We have been tenants before. We've been landlords for about 5 years now. And I think that rent stabilization is important. Whether we call it affordable housing or we find that rent stabilization is a way to maintain affordable housing, I think it's critical to the nature of Takoma Park and the way in which we we behave as a community. I would consider a few things that you may want to change. I can send my comments to you via email or more written comments, but things like the capital improvement petition increase. If people put money into their properties, they can increase the rents. Maybe amortizing our expenses over a shorter period of time instead of 15 years might help us recoup it more quickly. Property tax relief for those of us who own small buildings. We don't have the luxury of economy of scale, and buildings on my block, I live on Roanoke Avenue. The house next door went for $375,000 last October. There are houses across the street, 4 and 6 units, that are $400,000. Some provision in the rent stabilization allowance for those of us that include utilities in our rents. I agree with Ms. Delasante, who talked about the increase in our gas prices and electric prices. It is true that we knew it was coming, but there's only so much you can do. You still have to provide utilities to your tenants. So I would say that some provision in that allowance for those of us that include the utilities. My gas cost went up more than 50%, and electric is another 20 or so percent. I think it's important to maintain the ability for people to live in our community. They enrich us all, and it's possible that the city and those single-family owners would contribute through property tax relief or something else for those of us to be able to own buildings and maintain it for the benefit of our tenants. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shalinda Burney, followed by Sebastian Segundo.
Hi, my name is Shalinda Burney, and I'm here representing Community Preservation and Development Corp., CPDC, a affordable housing developer in the Mid-Atlantic region. My request here is regarding lifting the rent control and rent stabilizations for properties that have some other type of state or federal funding on it. For example, a lot of the properties that we develop or redevelop or renovate have low-income housing tax credits. We would like to see that the rent stabilization be lifted for those units that have some other source that allows and protects for affordable housing within the city of Takoma Park. So we would like for you to consider, as units get turned over, and if we're renting to residents that are at 30, 50, or 60% of the area median income, that we be allowed to take the rent up to the ceiling, which matches on the federal level. Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
we also would like to request one last thing for properties that have nonprofit ownership, to have some exemptions relative to the rent control, rent stabilization. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sebastian Segundo, followed by Jane Holmes. Anyone with a name close to that? All right, Jane Holmes.
Jane Holmes, and my husband Frank and I are landlords in Pinecrest. We have listened to the discussion of rent control and various bribe products over the past months, many of which were scheduled late at night when council members were very tired. Landlords are Takoma Park small business owners. We provide well-maintained apartments. All we want to do is stop losing money. Expenses have gone up 30 to 40%, while rents are up only 10% over many years. You do the math. We like being landlords, and we have good relationship with our tenants. Now you are working towards putting 17 good tenants out because you refuse to see that we are losing money. By forcing landlords to finance Tacoma Park's version of affordable housing, you are leaving landlords little choice. Condominium conversions in Tacoma Park are a direct result of these policies. That might not be what is causing the conversions elsewhere in the county, but it is causing it here. We know you went to Annapolis to lobby to have condo laws changed to prevent condo conversions in Tacoma Park. So it's just a matter of time. You leave landlords no choice. And landlords, be aware that time to act is now, before it's too late. Landlords see support from only a couple of the council persons and scorn from some. To see it from our point of view once in a while, try to see it from our point of view once in a while before you have any you don't have any apartments left to regulate at all. After hearing the discussions, we're afraid that you will tinker with the existing rules to further strangle landlords. We heard about other jurisdictions that practice rent decontrol with success. This would allow property owners to get the rents to market rate with no impact on existing tenants. The property returns to rent control rules after, so you still win. So help us stay landlords. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes the list of people who have signed up in advance for the hearing. Before I say that, we'll just check and see if there's anyone else who's...
What about the one that was on the other list?
I covered it on the list. Is there anyone else on this list? Okay, I spoke a bit too soon. We have a few more people signed up. I'll go through this list. And then we will open up the hearing to anyone else who would like to speak. I have someone who's just signed up as Hannah, and then someone who lives at the same address, or a similar address, who is Aki Habla, I believe. As I say, I may be not reading this name correctly. Is Hannah there? Okay.
It's not I'm a tenant by that address, and a low income, as somebody said just now. You know, what we get, we are paid by the hour, and what we get never increase since ever. Years I have been working. It never goes up. In fact, when the hours, I lose some hours, it goes down. Either I sick or I take care of my children, I couldn't go. And I'm not paid by that time. So it's not that only low income. There is a time if I have an emergency that I don't even get paid. And I give priority to the rent because I don't want to be evicted. I don't even buy enough food. Before I pay my rent, I would not even go to the grocery because of my financial problem. I can live by what I have, but if it's going to increase tremendously as they are saying now, I can't live. I can't really exist. I can't take care of the children as a single mother. I have a son who's a junior as well. So really you have to consider us too. I can understand the problem of the landowners. I can understand, I'm a human being. But ours, they say things are increasing on them, the gas, the electricity or whatsoever. But we don't get any increase on our paycheck. It's just low. We really ask the community. I'm very satisfied with this community. I'm happy. The area is so quiet, peaceful. I come at midnight, after midnight. I don't get scared. This place is really the right place for me. But if the rent is going to increase, I have to go somewhere and live with fear. So please consider us, those who are having this so-called low-income people. We are struggling in life. Thank God that we are living day by day with what we have. We're poor, but we know how to live with what we have. But if things are going to go higher, and food, everything is going high on us too. Gas, everything we buy, every time is increased. So I really ask you to consider our problem and really, same with her, she's not going to talk, so I'm talking for both of us. Consider our problem. Please do think of us.
Okay, thank you. The person that you referred to, the next person I have listed is Aki Habla. You don't want to speak? Okay. The next person is Sharon Robinson, followed by Eric. It looks like Denefield, or is it Denchfield? Okay, all right. Well, Sharon Robinson to be followed by Eric Denchfield. Sharon Robinson? Sharon R., any other name? Okay. Eric Denchfield to be followed by Peter Aaron.
I'm Eric Denchfield. As a landlord, with the new inspections of the buildings, we have to do a lot of improvements. And to pay for those improvements, I've had to get credit line loans from the bank. I repaid the bank with an interest-only payment in a balloon at the end after so many years. Even with the capital improvement petition, the increase is, even with the capital improvement petition, the increase in rent is less than the interest-only payment. So it's like having a credit card and just making the minimum payment. You can never get caught up. And I'm wrestling with the decision now whether to keep renting the buildings or to convert to condos. I have about 60 units, and I converted one building to condos, and it was successful. I think most landlords like me would like to keep the rentals, and we'd like to do the right thing for the community. If we could just fix the capital improvement petition so you can at least fund the payments, and if we could just not try to make a profit, but have protection from the extreme negative cash flow, so we could have some way of simplifying the hardship petition. I think only 4 people filled it out, and I can't figure out how to do it. It's very, very complicated. So if the landlords just have a little protection from extreme negative losses, I think we'd be pacified.
Thank you. Peter Aaron.
Good evening. My name is Peter Aaron, and I own a 9-unit building in Tacoma Park. And I'm going to be brief here. I've owned this building since 96 or 97, and I think, I might be wrong, but up to last year, I think the rent stabilization entitled me to take a rent increase of up to, I think, around 14.7%. So I just wanted to bring to your attention some of my major expenses and what's happened to them since that period of time. Just to say that insurance has pretty much tripled since 97, that my taxes have doubled. Other utilities like garbage has tripled. And everybody knows what's happening with utilities. So I just want to bring that to your attention and say, you know, how are we supposed to cover these expenses? I'll just say that I went under the inspection regime of Tacoma Park. I was always on a 2-year cycle, because my building is and always has been well maintained. When Montgomery County took over last year, they found a host more items that needed to be repaired and maintained, which I was happy to do. However, because of the way the rent improvement petition works, a number of those items that are building-wide, they don't reach the threshold amount to be included, so they're totally uncovered by the petition mechanism. I will say that what has been covered over the years in the petition has been the only thing that's enabled me to keep afloat under the the capital improvement petition. To the extent that it's cut back will just make it totally unfeasible for me to continue renting in Tacoma Park. When I bought the building, I was advised to put a condominium, make it a condominium, because I was advised that the day would come when I would be losing money on the building. So I did that. So the building is already a condominium. I've been renting it, though, as a rental unit all these years. And I'm happy to continue. I would be happy to continue doing that. But I would just say with figures like these.
Can you wind up?
I'm done.
Okay.
I mean, with figures like these, I just have to ask you all, how is it going to be possible to do that?
Thank you. That's the final name of individual who's signed up in advance. If there's anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing, please come up to the podium and state your name very clearly so the clerk can get it. Why don't you come up, and first the lady in the blue jacket and then the gentleman in the gray suit.
Hi, I'm Sharon Robinson. I'm co-owner of 8208 Houston Court. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in these proceedings. The City of Tacoma Park administers a robust rent stabilization program that discourages investors, encourages tenants to relinquish personal responsibilities, administered by paid legal and accounting consultants, and staffed by well-meaning and kind individuals who are not properly trained in technical and administrative training to administer the program. I purchased my 6-unit building in April 2005 after receiving copies from the building inspector's report from the Office of Landlord-Tenant Affairs, only to learn that the reports that I received were inaccurate, outdated, and false. Further, I attended landlord-tenant class and received a certificate. At that time, we were provided with sample instructions on how to apply for a capital improvement rent increase. After consulting with the staff of the landlord-tenant office, I spent $14,935 to replace windows in an apartment building that I own. When I followed the guidelines and sample that the office distributed for landlords to follow, I learned that the city had handed out a sample that used an inaccurate formula to calculate capital improvement. This staff error cost me $14,935. When I filed a formal complaint with the Landlord-Tenant Commission for reconsideration and requested a transcript of such, your general counsel informed us that the commission had lost the hearing tape. Finally, the cost of fuel has risen more than 35%, and yet the City of Tacoma Park's rent stabilization program has no provision to allow landlords to recover these direct expense increases. By continuing to suppress rents, the city makes its apartment stock unattractive to mortgage lenders and difficult to sell, forcing landlords to convert buildings to condominiums. It's time to revamp these laws, upgrade staff training, upgrade your record keeping, and reduce the use of outside paid consultants at taxpayers' expense.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Good evening. My name is Barry Wirtley. I have been a managing partner of the partnerships that have been involved in ownership of rental properties in Tacoma Park for well over 40 years. Everybody who has spoken previously have been right in what they said. There's no question everyone feels that their point of view is the right point of view. Your job is not easy. I'm just here to tell you that there have been 2 jurisdictions, Montgomery County, District of Columbia, who have dealt with these issues. I urge the council to consider vacancy decontrol and voluntary rent guidelines. There's no way landlords like myself are going to ever believe that you're going to get rid of rent stabilization altogether. We're not that naive. There are willingly and knowingly buyers who are willing to come in and pay enormous prices to convert to condo. Those people who have spoken before who said they have done that or will consider that, it's a matter of personal preference and economics. I've been offered a lot of money for properties such as the Deauville Apartments, Lee Avenue, Wedgwood, Sherwood. Some I've sold years ago. We're still here in Tacoma Park. It's not because we are liking to not make as much money as we did before. We still make money. Question is, you have a big problem ahead of you. And I urge you to consider that those jurisdictions that have wrestled with this problem and have gone the way of either a voluntary rent control guideline or vacancy decontrol. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Anyone else?
Yes, I got one thing I'd like to say. When it comes to rent decontrol, I'd like you to think of the elderly, the handicapped, and the people who don't have any jobs or money. Or if they do have jobs or money, they have very little to spend on rent. And one thing I think, an idea I have, I don't know if it's a viable idea, but if you have more crime control, you might take the load off the landlords when it comes to broken windows, when it comes to gangs tagging somebody's building, with MAC or EFD or 88 this or 8800 or other gang related, because people have to paint that over or clean that off, and that costs landlords money. We need more crime control, more drug control, more violence control, more police protection for our tenants and our landlords, and we need to be careful who our tenants are. That way, I think, we could take a load off the landlords and a load off the fear of the tenants. That way we can protect our buildings and our people in our buildings we got to think about. So think about the elderly and the handicapped, people like me, who cannot afford regular housing and who try our best to take care of the housing we have. Another thing I'm wondering is, how about a volunteer program, like Habitat for Humanity? What if we could set up something like that so that the people could volunteer to help landlords and help elderly people take care of their properties, so that, it wouldn't cost so much, for the landlords to have to go into, condominiums and stuff, or sell off their stuff and put more and more people on the street. Putting people on the street is not the answer. Allowing tagging and spray painting of buildings is not the answer. Allowing broken windows is not the answer. Allowing violence is not the answer. That is just another form of economic violence. We've got to put an end to that. Get the gangs out. Get the drugs out. Get the hatred out. Get the stupidity out. This is Tacoma Park, not Jackassic Park. I think we can do something about it so we can all live together in peace. I think we can do it, and I don't think putting people on the street, putting low income on the street, putting elderly on the street is the answer. I think we can do it, and I think we have to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you.
All right.
Shalinda Varney, CPTC. I did want to add two more comments that I forgot earlier. One is regarding the capital improvement petition and the landlord's inability to request for a capital improvement once a previous landlord has submitted. An example is a project that we're looking at over in Tacoma Park, on New Hampshire Avenue. The previous landlord has filed a petition in the past for completing work on the masonry facade, which was done inadequately or not in completion. And because of the capital improvements being a lifetime one-time grant, we're not going to be able to, or it'll be difficult for us to come in to request a capital improvement on that. So I'd like for you all to reconsider if a previous landlord has come in and requested for a capital improvement and it's been 5, 10, or outside of the depreciable period, for a new landlord to be able to request for capital improvements. And the other thing I wanted to mention is allowing for, specifically for nonprofit housing developers that are focusing on low-income housing tax credit projects, to be able to get these capital improvements up front. It will eliminate our need to come in for future hardship petitions in the event that utility and all other costs increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Do you have something in addition?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And I'll be brief. The tenants who have spoken eloquently here tonight pose serious social policy problems for the city. Do you help the single mom with a student who's about to finish high school? Her building's going condo. Where is she going to live? What's she going to do? Those are things you need to address. But the tenants who are not speaking here tonight are, well, many, obviously, but also some of them are tenants who don't really need the additional help. Has the city bothered to ask tenants, do you need financial assistance? Landlords will tell you stories about tenants who have expensive cars where their car payments are taking the place of their rent payments. Those aren't the people that you're really aiming at helping. The women, mostly who have spoken here tonight, are the people you ought to be focusing on. And rent control's just too broad a brush to do that. Focus on what you really mean to decide what you really mean to do, focus on it, and you'll have a successful program.
Thank you. All right. Before we close the public hearing, is there anyone else who would like to be heard? All right. Seeing no one else. Okay. Someone else is coming.
Hi, my name is Margarita Whitley, and I've been living in Tacoma Park for the past 10 years, and I want to say that I have never lived in an apartment that was not roach-free. I'm sorry to be so vulgar, but roach-free or rodent-free. I don't know what it's like to live in luxury. I stay in Tacoma Park because that's all I can afford. You know, that's all that I can afford for my children, and I do enjoy the area, and I do enjoy the environment. But when I go home, that is not really a place that I want to go to, because I don't know what it's like to live in an apartment that doesn't have roaches. I don't know what that's like. Every apartment that I've lived in Tacoma Park, and there's only been 3 in the last 10 years, have had roaches or have had, rats, or I'm sorry, not rats, but mice. So I don't know what that's like. So, I don't want to sit here and say that, the landlords are wrong, but like I said, all I can say is I don't know what it's like to live in an apartment without roaches. And I've lived in 3 in the last 10 years. And in the apartment that I live in, people move in and out left and right because there's so many roaches and there's so many problems with the apartments. And every time you call the Senko management, you have to call them 6 and 7 and 8 times before they come out and fix anything. And people don't want to live like that. So people move in and out quickly. I stay because, like the lady said, that's all I can afford, and that's why I stay. So I just want you guys to please consider that. I hear what the landlords are saying. They're saying that they spend so much money on the properties, but I've never enjoyed any of these improvements that they've done. Unfortunately, I've never been one to enjoy any of the improvements that they claim that they make all the time. I've never been one to enjoy that. So I just hope and pray that you take that into consideration, that there's a lot of us that are living in these apartments, and we have to live in really uncomfortable conditions. Like in the wintertime, I cannot barely sleep at night because it is so cold in my bedroom. It is warm in the living room, and it's halfway warm in my kids' room, but it is freezing in my bedroom. So every winter, I suffer. Every single winter. Winter after winter, I suffer. So for me, if the rent goes up, I will have no other alternative than to just move to another state where I can afford the rent. And maybe I can live in a decent apartment without roaches and without mice. Thank you.
Excuse me, can you tell me what road you live on?
Yes, I live on Roanoke Avenue, and the property is Roanoke Associates.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Greetings, hello. My name is David Kober, and I own a few townhouses on Kennebec Avenue. After hearing what everybody had to say, until now, we haven't come to any solution. But if everybody's arguing over here about this capital improvement, where not always does the city grant the owner to recoup what he has laid out, perhaps it would be a suggestion that whatever the inspector from Montgomery County writes down, let's do away with this 1.8, or let's do away with this rent stabilization I believe it takes effect in July, for 2.8. let the tenant take care of these capital improvements. Whatever the inspector writes down, don't let the owner get it, let the tenant get it, and avoid this 2.3 or 2.8. Another way that we can satisfy this is if you don't want any, if you want there to be a restriction on rent control, you know what? Whatever the tax bill is, let it be divided by the amount of units there are, and let the tenant pay for the taxes. This way, the city would get their money, whatever it is, and the owner would be exempt from paying the taxes on that particular unit that he owns. I feel these are two suggestions. One, you don't want the rent control. There should be a rent control of less than 1%. But you know what? Kick back any improvements or anything that the inspector writes down. Let the tenant take care of it. After all, the tenant does live there. If it needs to be painted, if there's a plumbing problem, let the tenant take care of it. Likewise, when the tax bill comes and the owner gets it, don't have the owner pay it. Have it be divided. If the tax bill is $1,000 and you have 10 units, then you divide it and let each unit pay $100 for that. And this is my opinion, which I feel would resolve and make things easier for the owners and for the tenants, and just do away with this rent control.
Thank you. And would anyone else like to speak? Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Hi, my name is Carla Romero. Actually, I didn't come prepared, but I also have a complaint about my building. I mean, I don't, like the other lady said, I don't mean to be vulgar or anything, but we also have problems with roaches and with actually bugs as well. And they actually, not to be talking bad about them, but they actually just come every hours of the night to, to kill these bugs, but we're still suffering from them. And, like they've actually sprayed for like 5 times, and we're still suffering. And we actually wanted to move to a 2-bedroom, and they didn't give us a chance. And I have a daughter who's 7.5-year-old, and she's suffering. And it's really emotional for me because they, the increase. We understand about the increase, and we just don't live well, in Tacoma Park. My daughter's been going to the, to the same school, and
take your time.
We work very hard. I'm married, and we're low-income people, and actually we were told by our manager that we had to throw our beds and our furniture because we were in the process of moving to a 2-bedroom apartment, which we couldn't afford. We don't even have the money to pay for the beds and the furniture because we're low-income people. We work, me and my husband, work very hard each day to support our child. And actually, his mother is here, and they just didn't give us a chance. We've been living for...
What building are you in?
8624 Flower Avenue.
Flower.
We just feel like we've been abused, and that we're very upset about this. We've been living in the building for like 7 years, ever since I was pregnant with my daughter. And we also had problems with the heat. In the wintertime, when we had to buy like box heaters. And if you can please help us and hear us out. That's what I have to say.
Well, thank you for coming this evening. We appreciate it. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at the public hearing this evening?
I spoke earlier. I'm Ellen Ensel. I'll be brief. It sounds like we need more housing code enforcement. It sounds like we need some other ways in which we can make sure that low-income folks have a place in our community. and that landlords are able to recoup their expenses in order to improve their buildings. Maybe workshops on how to do a capital improvement petition. For the gentleman, he said he couldn't figure out, or that it was too difficult to do a hardship petition. I completely understand, although I have done 2 capital improvement petitions over the 5 years, and I'm going to file another one because we replaced all of our windows. I think that the city needs to do more education and more training for landlords. I took that certification program. Actually, it was sort of, everybody read the code. I'm sorry, I'm out of time. I think that you need to do more education and to help us stay landlords, as one woman mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I want to thank everyone who took the time to come out this evening and talk to the council. This is an issue that has been very important to us and will continue to be very important to us. We have a number of discussions coming up. Next week, on the 3rd of April, the council will have a work session to talk generally about the city's rent stabilization ordinance, to talk about the objectives and purpose. This is something that we've begun to talk about, and I know several people have mentioned this, to talk about the goals and what we're trying to achieve. On the 17th, we're scheduled to get a presentation from our staff on recommended revisions to the ordinance, and we will, the week following that, we'll have a discussion of those recommendations and where the council wants to go with them. So there are still a number of discussions coming up. We haven't yet finished. You all are welcome to attend any of these meetings. We also intend to have other opportunities for public comment. All the discussions the council has will be on the cable channel, and now they're, of course, on web streaming. You can look at them if you don't have a computer at home. You can look at them on the computers at the library. And somebody can show you how to work those at the computer center. So I hope you all will continue to follow these discussions as they go on, and I very much appreciate the time and the effort and the very thoughtful comments everyone has made, and I appreciate you all coming out and sharing your thoughts with us this evening. Thank you all. We will now have a brief recess before we go into the remainder of our agenda. legislative agenda. All right, the first item on our regular meeting agenda is the first reading of the resolution regarding the charter amendment. The charter amendment, as has been noted, actually has several things in it. Was someone going to introduce this, or Barb, was somebody going to? You're going to introduce it? Okay. Why don't you pull the microphone down so that...
In the November 8th election, there was an advisory referendum on the ballot asking the voters their opinion on whether the city should change to an instant runoff voting system. The results of the election showed an overwhelming majority of voters interested in adopting that kind of system. Subsequently, Council discussed the issue in the work session, directed staff to develop 3 amendments to the charter. One would change the voting process for the city to an instant runoff voting system. The second change has to do with the scheduling of the day of the nominating caucus and the inauguration. So the city attorney drafted language concerning the instant runoff voting system. She discussed she worked with Robert, the Fair Vote, in developing the language. The second charter amendment the council requested was to allow some flexibility in scheduling the nominating caucus. And the city attorney did draft language providing some flexibility with that. Very fine and complete. Essentially, it says the nominating caucus, the meeting shall be held on a date selected by the council that is no more than 5 weeks and no less than 4 weeks prior to the election. Currently, the nominating caucus is set for Tuesday evening, 5 weeks before the election. The third request of some of the council members was to change, to allow some flexibility in the date of the inauguration of the council. The city attorney recommended against that change because she said that a charter amendment to permit the date for the newly elected council members to take office to be set prior to each election would mean that there is no set term of office for council members. Essentially, the council would be setting their own term. So the city attorney did advise against making that change to the charter.
Okay. There's before the council, the city attorney has drafted a proposed charter change which incorporates the first two items that the city clerk mentioned, but not the third, because it was her advice to us that would be, I guess, inadvisable.
I would like to suggest that whoever introduces this split the 2 issues because I think they are distinctly different, and I know that my vote would probably be different on the 2 issues.
Well, one way to do that would be to introduce the charter amendment as it stands, and then to move an amendment to remove a portion of the language out of it. In other words, if you wanted to remove the thing on the nominating caucus, you would remove the final 3 whereas clauses and the first part of Section 1, which deals with Section 308 and Section 604. I'm sorry, the first part of, the part of Section 1 which deals with Section 604, is that correct?
I would like to introduce it with those deletions.
Okay, so you're introducing it without the sections on the nominating caucus?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any council comments on that? I would, go ahead.
I concur with the direction that the mover is going. Likewise.
I'd like to, and we'll see if I can get a second on this, I'd like to amend the motion on the table to put back in those, the last three whereas clauses and the Section 604 on nominations. I think that there's a couple of things here that are important. One is the city being cognizant of allowing people to participate in our election process, even if there's a conflict with a major holiday in their religion. I think it's important to note that Rosh Hashanah is not any holiday in the Jewish calendar. It's one of the two most important holidays. It's sort of like putting the nominating caucus on Christmas or on Easter. I think it would preclude the participation of a number of people who would have a very serious conflict. The other thing is, I think the way we do it now, which is to hold the nominating caucus on the date specified in the charter, and then to hope that someone at the nominating caucus will move it to the following night or a subsequent night, is not a transparent process. It isn't clear. We try and make it as clear as we can, but someone who is not in the know would not necessarily know what's being done or why. It's also open to manipulation. It would be fairly easy for one of the candidates to show up at the first night with a number of supporters, vote down the motion to move the date of the nominating caucus to a subsequent date, and then force it to be held that night. If somebody believed that it was being moved to the second night and didn't show up the first night, they would end up not being on the ballot. So I think that we've got to bite the bullet, and we've got to make a decision that if we are going to move it off the religious holiday, which I think we should, then there should be a way in the charter for that to happen, for it to be transparent, and for people to know that that's what we intend to do. So I would move the amendment to put those sections back into the resolution. Is there a second?
I'm going to second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Bruce?
If I can just speak to one thing you said in offering the amendment, you stated that if somebody were to manipulate the caucus and have it on that Tuesday, that somebody who was counting on it not being on that Tuesday would then potentially not be on the ballot. That's not the way our process works. In addition to the nominating caucus, there's also the write-in candidates, and they are on the ballot. It's just as easy to get on that way. So I'm not saying that that's necessarily what you want to do, but I would say that your statement was inaccurate.
Well, actually, not write-in candidates, even official write-in candidates, are not actually on the ballot. No, they're not on the ballot. There's notification at the polling place that they're an official write-in candidate, but you cannot get on the ballot unless you are nominated at the nominating caucus.
Could I ask the city clerk to verify that?
Yes, that's right.
Nominations close at what?
Write-in candidate the week before the election.
But what is the closing date for nominations? Is that at the nominating caucus, or is it the end of the week of the nominating caucus?
For on the ballot, it's the nominating caucus.
The nominating caucus.
You can be an official write-in candidate, but you won't be on the ballot.
Thank you.
Colleen?
Is it possible, or does it make sense to amend this so that it's specific to Rosh Hashanah, since it's a specific Rosh Hashanah issue, so that when that holiday comes up, that we would then hold the caucus on the Wednesday after?
Speak up a little bit.
I don't know the answer. The question was whether we could make this provision specific to Rosh Hashanah.
And the reason that I say that is because the criticism has been that it could be used at the council's whim to change the date around. But if you knew that it was specific to this holiday, because this holiday is the issue, and I don't think anyone foresees any other conflicts, then you would know exactly what was going to trigger it, and what the result would be that it would be the following Wednesday, and that would narrow the parameters such that I think it would address at least a significant portion of the commentary that I've heard.
One thing that we can do is, regardless of how this goes, we could ask the city attorney if we could narrow it in that fashion. I don't know. Jesse, do you have any thoughts as to whether that would be? I mean, I'm not trying to ask you for a legal opinion. I just don't know if you've discussed that with the city attorney.
We haven't discussed that.
Okay. Terry?
Thank you, Mayor Porter. I think the point I was making at the time that I introduced this tonight is that I don't want to see us tie an anchor to the instant runoff voting, and I think that it should be, if it's something that people want to discuss and want to consider and vote on, then we should introduce it as a separate resolution rather than try to take two disparate issues and vote on them at the same time. I personally feel that this that we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't need a solution, doesn't need a charter amendment to solve. I think that we were able to handle this maturely this year when we did have this last year when we did have the conflict, and I think this isn't something that comes up again in the near future.
If you remember, we did move it forward separately as a separate amendment, and the council voted it down because they wanted to combine it with the next amendment that came along.
That's what I remember as well. I'm inclined to support the mayor's proposal. I think that it makes this body responsive to religious holidays that we don't want to exclude people from our democratic process. I also feel that both of these things being part of the same charter amendment makes sense. It meant that we advertised it the appropriate way as the 2 or 3 items, and we've now removed one of the 3 items. I don't see that this is going to hamstring the instant runoff voting, which had widely popular support. It does kind of do some housekeeping that I think this council discussed and recognized was needed. We just didn't choose to pay for the separate advertising for that that would have been necessary for that charter amendment before the election. But I'm inclined to support the mayor's proposal and affirm both of these things.
Is there any other comments? Mark?
I'm inclined to support it, but hopefully with the clarification that we can, if we do this, have dates certain, like Tuesday, except on the occurrence of a Rosh Hashanah, in which case it's on Wednesday. Because I do think that the date certain part of it is something I would like to keep.
I will commit, if this passes, actually even if it doesn't, to check with the city attorney on that.
This is first reading.
This is first reading, that's right. It has to come up again anyway. All right, is there any other comments? The vote is on the amendment, which would add back in the sections on moving the date of the nominating caucus. All those in favor of adding that back in, why don't we do this by a hand vote, just so we're clear. All those in favor of putting back in the language on adding in the nominating caucus? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The amendment is passed. All right, the vote is now on the charter. All right, no. All those opposed? All right.
Good do hands, good do hands.
That's a very good point. Thank you for reminding me. I knew who the no's would be, but you could have certainly been an abstention.
We might have carried it.
You might have been an abstention. Okay, you might have been an abstention. The vote is now on the charter amendment as amended, which actually is the way it was actually presented initially, if people are trying to keep track of this. And I think we've actually spent a fair amount of time talking about the point that was originally discussed in the amendment, but this is actually a fairly substantial change in our voting procedures, and one that I spent a fair amount of time talking to voters about during the campaign. And I found a great many people who didn't understand it, who didn't know what it was, but actually, once it was explained, I think I only found maybe 1 or 2 people who didn't think it was a good idea. And so I think we may have a ways to go in terms of educating our voters on how it works, but I do think that once they understand that, I think that they will be supportive of it. And so I'm very happy to be in favor of this change in our voting procedure. Is there any other council comments? Are there any public comments on this charter amendment at first reading? All right, seeing none, I think we can do this by a voice vote. All those in favor, just because it's a charter amendment, do we have to do roll call vote?
I'm not sure. Can we do it?
Okay, the city clerk suggests that we do a roll call vote because it's a charter amendment. Do you want to call the roll?
Mayor Porter?
Aye.
Councilmember Austin Lane? Aye. Councilmember Barry? Aye. Councilmember Clay? Aye. Councilmember Elrich?
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Councilmember Williams?
Aye.
You're not abstaining?
I'm a reluctant aye.
Okay. The charter amendment resolution passes at first reading. There is a, remind me, there's a procedure set out in the charter for the timing of the second reading. And so I believe it's coming up in 2 weeks. Am I correct on that?
It is scheduled for 2 weeks.
Okay. The charter, I believe that they have to be at least 14 days apart. Is that correct?
I believe that's
Okay. Thank you. It's a good thing Jesse keeps track of these things. So the charter amendment passes at first reading. The second reading will be in 2 weeks. The second item on our agenda is the second reading of an ordinance which was tabled for 2 weeks ago, regarding the transfer of city-owned land to Montgomery County for the fire station.
Do we have certainty that if we pass this tonight, that everything else is okay?
No.
Then, because I would, then let's yank it until we have what we want. This thing should stay tabled.
Yeah, what I can add is that at the meeting last week, it was evident that residents are very concerned about the county's changes, and I appreciate that the county came forward withdrawing their proposal from the HPC, let us know what they were and were not changing, and reassured people. What I believe needs to happen now is the month that they estimated they would need to gather information and present it back to the public and to the council, most likely, that we take that month and just resolve any outstanding issues. I think really what the crux of the matter is the landscaping, both in between the house and the fire station parking lot and in front of the fire station on the apron. These are two areas where it's essential that we provide buffering and beautification so that we have the great impact of a nice streetscape on Carroll Avenue. So I think it is worth us pausing to make sure that this issue is resolved to our satisfaction, and then moving forward at the end of that month.
Bruce?
If I can just add 2 points.
You were at the meeting also, too.
Yes, a slight expansion of what Joy said about the landscaping in the front in particular. I think there's kind of a corollary concern about pedestrian safety in the front and how the possible switching of the landscaping with the handicap parking space is making it a lot less safe for pedestrians by essentially opening up a much wider slot where it's possible for traffic that wants to get around
traffic turning left from, I'll call it outbound Philadelphia onto Carroll, is able to kind of come up on the sidewalk in a much longer strip than is currently possible. So I think getting the solution to those landscaping issues and the corollary on the pedestrian safety is vital. And I just point out that the timing for us in terms of turning over the land to the county is not the county's biggest problem in terms of resolving the land issues, because they have remaining issues with the rest of the property and the volunteer fire department that they're behind in addressing. So we're in good shape in terms of timing with a second reading to come forward as needed. We're not going to be the thing that holds anything up.
I didn't hear that last sentence.
We're not going to be the entity that holds anything up.
If I'm understanding, the suggestion Joy made was holding it up for a month. I don't recall, I wasn't at the beginning of the meeting because I had another appointment, but what was the sense about if we tabled it for a month? Is that your proposal, Joy? Were you talking about tabling it for a month?
If they come back to us with the information that satisfies this concern, we could go forward sooner. But I believe we do need to get a commitment from them.
Why don't just table it indefinitely until it's solved, rather than, so we don't, if it's a month, we bring it back in a month. If it's 2 weeks, we bring it back in 2 weeks. But whenever neighbors are satisfied, then let's do it then.
No.
Unless you want to constantly remind the county that we're tabling until they conform.
I'm not an expert on tabling. Do we need to table to a time certain?
You don't need to table to a time certain, but generally, if you table indefinitely, then there has to be a separate vote to take the item off the table. If you table it to a time certain, then it comes back automatically.
I think we could just say, let's table it for 4 weeks.
For 4 weeks?
Because you could always table it again.
Sure. And
I like that.
That keeps it in front of us. That keeps the county aware that we want to get this done.
Let me just make sure. I'm just trying to figure out when 4 weeks is.
I think it'd be April 24th.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. Okay. It looks like that would be feasible. Now, that's going to be one of the dates that we're not here in this building.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. I certainly appreciate Councilmember Williams' input on, the effect on the county, but I think it would be prudent for us to have staff contact the county directly to make sure that we're not affecting their schedule.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
I doubt if we can do that before the council needs to make a decision on tabling it. Is there a proposal on the table? Is there a proposal? Okay, the proposal is to table it for 4 weeks. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
It's not debatable.
I don't recall, but in any case, I think we've already debated it, so I'll call the vote. All those in favor of tabling this item for 4 weeks, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, this item is tabled for another 4 weeks. Next item on the agenda is the first reading of the ordinance regarding speed humps on Sligo Mill Road. Now, we've got speed humps on two things. This is specifically the speed humps on Sligo Mill Road. Did someone want to introduce them?
I'd like to move the ordinance. I think we heard some concerns about more general traffic conditions in that neighborhood, and we talked about some possible ways to address that, and I look forward to some inclusion in the upcoming budget to be able to do some neighborhood traffic studies or similar that would address some wider concerns and look at wider impacts, and also the potential difficulties with commercial revitalization in that area and how it might affect the neighborhood. So I think our process is in place to go forward with the speed humps. They've done what's required. I'm happy to go forward with the speed humps, but also with the proviso that I think we're going to need to look at some other impacts in that area.
Okay. It's been
I'll
moved.
second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any additional council comments?
Yeah, it's probably in here.
Well, I certainly second the idea of doing
neighborhood-level traffic studies. I hope we do them all over the city. I had asked about the ADA requirements and the relationship between speed bumps and the ADA, and the city attorney was going to get back to us. And I wondered if we got that response. And while I was mulling over ideas for coping with access for folks in wheelchairs or even people in bicycles and things like that, going around the speed bumps, I was thinking that you could do a speed bump that didn't go all the way across the street at one point and up along the curb, then a few feet away you could do 2 shorter speed bumps, and so, or even 1 shorter speed bump, so someone in a wheelchair could basically go around it. You still have the speed bumps there, and you wouldn't have that problem of people who drive over to the side where there is no speed bump because there wouldn't be enough space between the two, because you only need 4 feet for the wheelchair accessibility. So I think that we could come up with some solutions that would address the issue.
I don't know, do we have any response?
No, I don't know if the city attorney has had some discussion with Ms. Braithwaite, but I'm not aware of any opinion from the city attorney's office coming in. I will touch base with her tomorrow and see if that's forthcoming.
And it's probably worth noting that the speed humps are a 2-reading ordinance, so it will come back to us. But perhaps we could get an answer to it prior to the 2nd reading. Any other council comments on this ordinance at first reading? Any public comments on the ordinance?
Hi, Nellie Moxley, President of Pinecrest. Thank you. That's what I wanted. And I'm sure that all the neighbors would feel much more secure with this type of study being done and other things looking at as calming. Separating the area of the resident area away from the commercial, I think, is where we should go with this. Okay. And that's what we did talk about all this in the last 2 weeks. And they seem to be more in favor of that, Bruce. So you're on the right track in looking at all of it. The other thing is, when you look at all this, decide on, as you so stated here about the speed bump length, we don't have sidewalks up there. So, and we do have 2 families, but they're not in wheelchairs, but they do have problems getting in and out of their cars. So that might be an idea to look at the height of that rather than, maybe you should make a table type one. Following me through.
My assumption is that the profile of the speed hump that we're talking about here is the standard city profile.
That's high.
It's more similar to the ones on Cockrell.
Actually, the standard, I know one location I can think of where the standard has gone in would be on Hickory. I think another one has gone in recently on, thinking it was Larch, perhaps?
Yeah,
but
there's one on Larch.
Yeah, but I know Hickory definitely was one of the first ones, Nellie, where the new standard was utilized, if you want to go check that out.
It's dropped down, spread out?
It is more spread out, yes.
Okay, that sounds better. Because some of the others, you can't get over your car, the back end's dragged, the whole bit. I need to tell you what an ambulance is like.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other comments?
Again, thank you.
All right, seeing none. This is the first reading of the ordinance. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ordinance passes at first reading. Now we have the ordinance regarding speed humps on Allegheny.
I'd like to move the ordinance.
Would someone like to
I'll second it.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Any council comments on this ordinance?
There was really no controversy. There's already 2 on the block. This was adding a 3rd.
Okay. Are there any public comments on the ordinance?
Yeah, just one I'd like to comment. My name is Pat Loveless, 7620 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park. Just one comment I'd like to make is if it's possible to make those speed humps a little more even in some places, because, you go over those things like in a car or an ambulance. I've been in that before, ka-chunk, ka-chunk, and there goes 2 or 3 more vertebrae in my back, and I'd like to, I know we need speed bumps to protect our city streets and our city residents, from speeders and stuff. But, one thing, is that they'll still speed over those things. I mean, a friend of mine in Silver Spring, he'll go over those things like a bat out of hell. And, you know, your back end of your car will just shoot up, and sometimes it feels like it's airborne and it slams down. There are some speed humps on Maple Avenue that you can go up over them things, man, and it feels like a chunk, a chunk, a chunk. And, I mean, every time I wonder how many, we gotta pass an ordinance to protect my vertebrae. You know, I haven't got much left of them, you know, and every time we go over them, I feel it sometimes. You know, just last week, somebody went over one. It was on Maple Avenue. I was on my way to another meeting, and I could feel, you know, like, you know, another bone was about to break. And you know, if it'd be possible to protect, you know, to make the profile of those speed bumps a little better, a little more, you know, amenable to people who have bone diseases, who have, you know, other conditions, you know, other than. You know, they can't walk right. Just think of people who have bad backs, bad vertebrae. You know, got to pass an ordinance to protect our vertebrae, for God's sakes. You know, because we've gone over those things, and boy, it feels like God, it feels like going over the Grand Canyon. Thank you very much. Let me share.
Thank you, Pat. You'll be happy to know that the new speed humps are a much more gradual profile, and the ones on Maple Avenue, well, I'm thinking, yeah, I probably know the ones you mean, are probably the last ones like that we're going to
Can they be replaced?
You've brought up a sore subject.
It's a very sore subject about that.
It's a pain in another back.
Yes.
They still need to be replaced.
I hear you, and I've heard that from other people too, but I think the ones that are there are the result of a very long, complicated process, and I don't think we can reopen it at this point.
Take them up. It doesn't take that much.
I hear you.
Can I make one comment about Allegheny? Just one. Bruce, we need to put a sign out so that during the winter months, the buses won't try to go up through there. Because what happened with the couple that's there now, the bus had to make a route change and was going to go up Allegheny, and they got caught between the speed humps, and we had to actually have them towed out because of the ice and everything. So we need to put a couple signs up when you add those next speed humps, means you're putting more there because of that hill and the consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just in response to what Pat had to say, I did a lot of research about the ADA accessibility issues, and the one issue that has been to court already was actually only taken to court in Maryland, and it's not the issue of people getting around the speed bumps in wheelchairs. Interestingly, it's the issue of people who have back problems that are going over the speed bumps, and there's a lot of momentum there. The one person who sued in Maryland lost the case, but it's important to note that the judge's commentary was that she had not really adequately demonstrated how going over the speed bumps affected her disability, which left that open. Didn't really, close it off entirely that this wasn't a valid course to pursue. But if somebody were able to demonstrate that there was a relationship between their disability and the pain and damage of going over the speed bump, that could come forward again. And that's just something for us to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you. Demonstrated with another broken bone.
Okay, the ordinance is in front of the council. This is the installation of the speed hump on Allegheny. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This ordinance passes at first reading. The next item that's in front of us is a resolution opposing a proposal to relocate the Montgomery Regional Office of Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission from Silver Spring to Rockville. This is something that has come up just fairly recently, proposed by a county council member, that it be moved to Rockville. And I think there's a lot of concerns in this part of the county about having all of the county council buildings in Rockville. I think it would tend to depress participation in efforts to get the public involved in these kinds of things. It's also the particular agency, Park and Planning, was also going to be the cornerstone of a new development as part of the Silver Spring revitalization, and would hate to see it pull out and handicap that particular development. So the resolution expresses the opposition of the council to that proposal.
Move it. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Anyone else like to make a comment? Bruce and then Terry.
I won't claim originality for these thoughts. I thought Mark put some ideas fairly well together today. That one of the things that the county council might be trying to address with this potential move is to centralize the staff to be able to communicate better with other county staff. And in this electronic age, I don't think that's particularly necessary. And I thought the idea to be able to have park and planning have hearings on particular issues that they're looking at, area plans or master plans, that they could go out and have hearings in those communities rather than always making everybody go to park and planning. I think that would get a lot better input for the kinds of issues that they deal with, and they could still remain in Silver Spring and help continue the revitalization there.
You know, it's just been the last couple of days that I was aware of this proposal to move park and planning, and I really I've heard some arguments for and against it, and I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other, but I do have a strong opinion about the process. And it just seems that when, you know, the discussion, all the discussion is centered around the renovation of the facility here in Silver Spring, and then out of the blue, a quick decision is asked for moving the facility without a lot of public discussion. I'm opposed to that, and I'm also opposed to spending money, and I'm not sure whether that, you know, this is the case in this particular situation, but I think, you know, there are many residents of the county who need the assistance from the county, and I'm not sure that this is the most cost-effective way of dealing with park and planning, providing for their needs. This needs more public discussion. I would like to see if this is costing extra money, if the extra money would be spent to help replace some of the federal CSBG money that is being displaced by the federal government. So I support this just because it hasn't been adequately discussed.
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems is that they don't know where they're going to go, and very much related to that is this argument about whether you're actually going to accomplish what you set to accomplish. If you go to Rockville, the planning facilities are now located in the one of the office buildings next to the county executive, actually across from the county executive building above that garage there. And I don't believe, and from what I've heard, there's no room in there to relocate park and planning inside the same facility. So it's not that you're going to be in a situation where everybody's going to be in the same room in the same building anyway. In which case, if they want to communicate with each other, they're going to be doing it by email or by phone, which, near as I can tell, works as well from Silver Spring as it does from another building inside of Rockville. The money question is substantial. I mean, because they don't have the site picked out, they don't know what it's going to cost, and so you don't know what you would get by selling the park and planning facility in Silver Spring versus what it would cost you to acquire a facility and then develop the facility in Rockville, and they don't know whether they'd be able to get as favorable a situation because of how the development's being done in Silver Spring with a private developer. You don't know if you'd be able to do as favorable a deal in Rockville as they've got going here in Silver Spring. So a lot of economic unknowns in this that I think are worth considering. And I guess the other issue, and Bruce talked about the mobility of the hearings, I think something that everybody has got to think about. We've been frustrated, any of us who've been there, with the process that park and planning goes through. It's a very rapid, you get 3 minutes, and they try to even limit the number of speakers. And when you realize what their agenda is, and you think about how often they meet, it's really probably not an anti-democratic bent on their part. It's the fact that their agenda is enormous. They're all part-time. They have this one meeting that they try to cram everything into. And so you're asking these part-time commissioners to hear all the cases, discuss and weigh all the cases, and do all this in an evening of testimony. And I think the load on the commissioners is really high, and I think that there's been some discussion, there probably needs to be more discussion But if there really is that much for them to do, and the conflict between the workload and the amount of time is such that they're not really paying attention to what they should be paying attention to adequately, then maybe the commissioners need to be moved more toward a full-time status. If they really are busy all the time, and they really have all this paperwork to wade through, none of us are well-served by commissioners who sit there, hear 3 minutes of testimony, and then are supposed to digest everything everybody said and vote. And one of the things we did on the council was we tried to separate out the nights we vote from the nights we hear public testimony. We've talked about wanting to give ourselves a chance to digest it, not just simply vote right afterwards. And I think Park and Planning's been forced into a situation where everything is compressed. And if they're not limited to one night, then the relocation of hearings to other parts of the county makes a lot more sense and would be a lot more feasible. So I'd like to see them stay here. That's why I wrote the letter, and I hope we can persuade the fifth person to, because right now the vote is 5 to 4 to move Park and Planning.
Is there any other comments, Council? Are there any public comments on this ordinance, this resolution?
I have a question on this here resolution, as you made a statement.
Can you move the microphone closer? There you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You specifically stated about it, extensive planning has been underway. I'm down in paragraph 1, 2, 3, 5 down.
Yep.
Extensive planning has been underway and approximately $1 million has been spent, blah, 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 and you can read that yourself. Stopping this process and beginning, you seem to be going along with the fact of being with Park and Planning, and then you turn around and you say, because the current facilities are deteriorated and provide a poor working environment for staff, the county could avoid any further delay in providing new facilities for Park and Planning. I think you better go over that. We were annexed into here, and at the time we had to go all the way to PG County. You don't meet in just one room. You're all over PG when you go. This was one of the things in being annexed in for the county into here that we would be part of and could get to the facilities of zoning and so on, Park and Planning, and all the offices. Because you go to Upper Marlboro, you go here and here and here for PG. It would be, I watched them redevelop Park and Planning from little small rooms and enlarging it and doing what they've done here. It's gorgeous compared to what they had. Now the facilities, if they would move them out there in Rockville, they would be right back where they were before in small rooms, where they would not have the type of facilities now, because as you so stated up here above, $1 million has been spent towards this development here that they have now. They would have to turn around and redo it again out there. Well, they don't have the money. We all know that already. What it amounts to, and we need to think positive here, there's been a lot of things said lately. So what they want to feel and know is that we do care about Park and Planning, and we do not care about what's been going on in Clarksburg. We support our Park and Planning. We want to stand behind them. They will get behind whatever happened in Clarksburg, which we know is all wrong. But Burlage and the ones that are there now, we're not all to blame. Mr. Silverman himself was in charge of this. So we need to look at that all the way. We also need to be positive and make sure that we support this whole thing, because this is part of our city. We've worked with them, we've been with them, and we've done a lot with them. So we need to let them know in no uncertain terms that we want them to stay where they are and the communities are behind it.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, seeing none. Any council comments? All right, the resolution.
I'm probably going to be at the county council session tomorrow and would be happy to present this on behalf of the council if that would be welcome.
Do they have a time that you could present it? You don't need to answer that question right now. I think, it would be very appropriate for you to bring it, whatever would be the means we could do that.
Okay, great. It's scheduled for 9:50 during their discussion of capital improvement programs in the Silver Place project.
Okay. All those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is a ordinance regarding the purchase of equipment for remote video production.
I'll be presenting this evening as Ms. Moffett is currently on vacation leave. She is requesting that the council approve the purchase of what is referred to as the Sony Anycast live content producer. I guess the euphemism she has used in my conversations with her is a studio in a box. And basically what it will allow the staff to do is to basically do multi-camera shoots when they're working in a remote location. As some of the council may recall, we have typically used the PEG van for some of the folk festival and things like that. This will actually allow us to do some shoots in some locations where the PEG van's just not feasible. For instance, if we were using the large multi-purpose room in this building, obviously you can't drive a van into the building, and it's just a little bit more cost-effective than actually having to pay for the cost of the van. I know one of the events upcoming that she would like to have this technology in place for is when we move to the Tacoma Park Middle School for that approximately 3-week period for council meetings. This would actually make it much easier for us to basically tape the council meetings during that time period when we're displaced by the construction. From a financial standpoint, the cost is just a little bit over $16,000. This would be a cooperative purchase writing off a GSA contract. It is a funded item. As some of the council may recall, there are some funds budgeted every year from the capital grant monies. They're basically included in the special revenue fund, and basically as items are identified that are appropriate for the use of those funds, staff brings back a specific ordinance requesting the council's permission to purchase those items. So it is a budgeted item in FY06.
I think it's a good idea to do the purchase. I have a question, though, about the nuclear-free ordinance. I understand that I did read the material, and I do understand that it may have been on the nuclear-free list in error. However, my recollection is that the law says that we use the list, and we know it's subject to changes, and I guess it's maybe potentially subject to errors, but we use the list until we adopt the new list. And so I guess this may be a legal question, but do we need a waiver because it's on the list, even though it may have been on the list in error, or maybe no longer on the list?
I think that is a legal question. I don't honestly know if Ms. Moffett did consult with the city attorney's office. I'm not aware of any discussions. I think our impression was that as it appeared to be a data error that was just a coding problem, that it was sort of inappropriately placed on the list, if you will. I do know that she spoke to Jay Levy, chair of the Nuclear Free Committee, and he did not appear to have any concerns. Obviously, they only get involved, however, if it's actually on the list and a waiver is required. I think in her discussions with Mr. Levy, he had no concerns about the coding error situation and consequently did not feel it was necessary for the Nuclear Free Committee to weigh in. If the council is not comfortable, then certainly we can confer with the city attorney and bring this issue back next week.
What does the council want to do? Gary?
I certainly think that we should stand by the spirit of the nuclear-free ordinance and not just ignore it because there happened to be a mistake that allows us to purchase something. We should be making an upfront and conscious decision if we're going to do business with a company that is or should be on the nuclear-free list.
Well, if I read the material, yeah, if I read the material correctly, it said that it was on the list. However, that may have been an error because it may have been. They may have put it on the list because one of their contracts was improperly coded as being related to a nuclear-type project, when in fact the coding, the DoD coding was wrong, and it was in fact it was related to it was not related to a nuclear project. It was related to a non-nuclear project. And so this is maybe a situation we haven't encountered yet where it was on the list, but it may have been on the list in error, and subsequent, it looks like subsequent investigation or research by Nuclear Free America may have turned up the fact that it was on the list as an error. It was not that it used to be nuclear free and it isn't any longer, which we've dealt with before, but it's a question of it may have been on the list initially by mistake. But I think that the question that I have is a much narrower question, which is, if I recollect correctly, the law says that if it's on the list, we have to treat it as a nuclear purchase, regardless of whether it shouldn't be on the list or it's no longer on the list or whatever. And so I guess if I think that's what we do. Even if we know something is no longer on the list until we've adopted a new list, we go by the list we have.
This way through this.
So the question is,
Follow the rules, that's easy.
well, I mean, we don't know what the rule would be. I think if it were clear, we could.
I think this is one of those unusual
Gosh, should we
circumstances.
table this until we know what the rule is?
Yeah, well, I don't think we've encountered the specific situation, and I'm sensing that there's some, at least questions on the part of the council, so I think at this juncture, I would suggest maybe just deferring it till next week. Currently, there are no special session items for next week, but with the council's indulgence, I would like to bring this back sooner rather than later, given that they're trying to acquire it before the move to Tacoma Park Middle School.
And if we can just, my only concern is that if we delay it a week, does that mean we're not going to have it for when we move those meetings? And if that's the case, I'd like to do something that we could do tonight that would get that in process. It's not like we're not going to purchase this thing.
Yeah, I don't.
It's either going to be that we say, the word that comes back is either, no, you're all right with the ordinance you've got, or no, you have to do one next week that waives it. Can we do something tonight that says, go ahead and get the purchase started if necessary to get it here in time for when we need it?
Yes. It may be worth, maybe we can get a sense of the council as to whether the council would be agreeable to doing this. And if that's the case, then presumably what you need the final authority for is you need the final authority to go ahead and sign the purchase.
That's correct. Obviously, as this is an item over $10,000, so it does require council approval for the staff to move forward.
And I'm not trying to hold it up. The question just is, are we complying with the nuclear-free ordinance or not? And as I said, I don't think this has come up before where it sounds like something was on the list in error. And maybe we could get a clarification of that, and so we know whether we have to do a waiver. I'm assuming that, the assumption I'm making, and I'll speak for myself, if it was on the list in error, I'm happy to do a waiver on that basis, that it shouldn't have been on there in the first place. And I'm assuming that that would be the council's decision if it were shown to be an error. But the question is, because it was on the list, do we have to do a waiver regardless? And I don't know the answer to that. And if it's not a problem to put it off for a week, that would be my suggestion to the council, that we delay for a week and get a legal ruling on that issue.
Or we go ahead and vote on this?
Or the other way we could do is we could go ahead and vote on this, and if it turns out we have voted in error, we would then have to redo it next week.
Yeah, you could just vote on this conditioned on the city attorney not having any discomfort with the requirements of the nuclear-free ordinance. And obviously, if there is an issue, then we would need to bring it back.
Okay, and that might save us bringing it back if there's not a problem. Okay, if the council then would like to go ahead and vote on it, and if it turns out that there is a problem, we would have to bring it back, then we could do that.
That's certainly agreeable with me. I just had one question, and that's under the physical impact. The PEG van is not mentioned, but under the background information, it does say that some setups of the PEG network van are not cost effective. And I just wondered how much we're paying for the PEG van.
What I can share with you, Councilmember Siemens, is when Ms. Moffett and I were talking about utilizing the PEG van for taping the council meetings, my recollection, it was in the neighborhood of about $1,500 per shoot.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if I'm reading the council correctly, the council would like to go ahead and move forward with the ordinance at this time.
Yes.
And then, so I'm not, is there an ordinance here?
10 times the PEG van, $15,000.
I'm actually not seeing an ordinance.
No.
Right.
Did we not get a copy of the ordinance?
Apparently not. I apologize. This item is problematic on a number of fronts.
The ordinance.
Never mind.
Never mind.
Never mind.
Theoretical ordinance. I don't have an ordinance.
I don't have an ordinance.
It does
here. I
not
just
appear that
mentioned-
an ordinance
Huh?
made it into the packet, therefore, if the council's more comfortable, you may just want to defer this till next week, since there seems to be a number of issues, including the fact you don't have an ordinance in front of you. I apologize for that.
Okay.
Can I ask also how many times we've used the PEG van, or how many
Sure.
times this would, 10 times of using the PEG van would still be cheaper than purchasing this package? I wonder how many times a year that we would be using this.
Sure, I can gather that information for you if this is coming back next week.
Thank you.
All right. In light of a number of problems with this, we're going to postpone that one until next week. And the next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing an allocation of program open space funds for FY07. We have talked about this one. It allocates $435,000 plus for the potential gym and $10,000 for the design for the Jackson Boyd playground. Been moved and seconded. Any additional comments? Any public comments on this ordinance? All right, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The resolution passes. The final item on our agenda this evening is the second reading of an ordinance regarding the budget amendment number 5 for fiscal year '06, which allocates funding for the portion of the community center that's being built right now. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any additional council comments? Any public comments on this ordinance? Since this is the second reading of the ordinance, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Porter?
Aye.
Councilmember Austin Lane?
Aye.
Councilmember Barry? Aye. Councilmember Clay?
Aye.
Councilmember Eldridge?
Aye.
Councilmember Seaver?
Aye.
Councilmember Williams?
Aye.
The ordinance passes its second reading. Having completed our agenda this evening, we are adjourned.